Fellow Toastmasters, everything you know about communication is wrong. At some point in your upbringing or your education, you were most likely taught to believe that the person doing the talking is the person dominating the conversation. This most likely has led you to do things like try to convince people of things, try to get people to listen to you, and try to get your point across. But the thing is, when you try to do one of those things, you're trying to accomplish something that's fundamentally impossible. See, what does convincing really amount to? Trying to get somebody to think differently than the way they think right now. Trying to get your point across amounts to trying to take thoughts and plant them in somebody else's mind. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have the ability to telepathically beam energy across the room and put a thought in your mind. But that's basically what you're trying to do verbally when you try to get your point across, so to speak. And trying to get somebody to listen to you, that's one of my favorites, because that reminds me of one of my stories from elementary school. My 5th grade teacher took me outside to have a little talk with me about not doing my homework, and he was really trying to get me to listen to him, particularly by raising his voice and getting this close to my face. And I started to notice that he had a little something dangling from his nose. And when he started getting upset and his face was turning red, he'd start breathing really loud, and there'd be like a little whistling sound. And at one point, it started like kind of swinging back and forth from his nose. And so suffice to say, I was trying not to look at that because I really didn't want to think about it. I was kind of afraid of what was going to happen next because my hand was right down below and I couldn't really politely move it. But so I tried to look up at his forehead where there was one of his moles that was easy to draw attention to. So kind of suffice to say, I wasn't really thinking a whole lot about what it was he was saying or the content of the things that he was saying to me. So getting me to listen, really wasn't maybe the goal he should have had in mind. But the point I'm trying to make is that all 3 of those goals really have one thing in common. They all amount to mind control. I mean, it kind of sounds science fiction-y when I say that, but it's ironic that that's exactly what we're trying to do when we try to change the way somebody else thinks and when we try to change the thoughts that are present in somebody else's mind. That's how we relate to communication. We exert the majority of our conversational muscle at trying to accomplish things that are fundamentally impossible. And we leave the real reserves of our conversational power almost completely untapped. So, to understand what's going on here, it's important to take a look at one aspect of communication that they don't teach you about in school, or at least they didn't teach me about this in school. And it's that talking and listening can't happen at the same time. Now, we think that conversation is going on while the talking is happening, but the reality is that conversation doesn't actually happen until the silent parts, the silent pauses in between the phrases that are spoken. Now, this might seem kind of academic, it might seem kind of interesting, but at the same time seem kind of irrelevant. When you think about it, it's really what makes the difference in effective communication. Because, let me relate a couple examples to you on this. Have you ever had a conversation with somebody that spoke a mile a minute, non-stop, and just stringing one sentence together after another, with no pauses at all in between for you to think about what they're saying? How much of what they said do you actually remember? Because during those pauses is when you can actually process what was just said. Perfect example. You ever had to evaluate a Toastmasters speech, and at the same time somebody else was up here giving the next speech? Your attention's divided between the two. The same phenomenon happens when somebody talks and doesn't allow significant pauses in the conversation. Another example, you ever been in a conversation where you stopped talking and the next person jumped right in and started talking as soon as you stopped? And you ever had a conversation that went back and forth like that both ways, or have you ever observed one between 2 other people? Now let me ask you, did you observe in that case that there was a whole lot of listening going on in that conversation? So the point I'm making is that no matter how well rehearsed the thing you say is, no matter how well articulated your point is, you can't get it across if the other person's not listening to you. And furthermore, you have no ability to affect the way the other person listens to you, or whether they listen to you at all or not. I mean, it's just like if I was standing up here delivering this speech to an empty room. It could be the greatest speech in the world, but it wouldn't matter. That's what happens in conversation when we relate to it through this old model that we've been taught to relate to conversation through. So, that being said, what is it that we can actually do? If we can't convince anybody of anything, we can't get our point across, and we can't change the way people listen to us, should we just give up and not bother talking to anybody ever again? There is good news. I'm going to give you 3 experiments that you can try. And this is going to allow you to take it on the court. Because I don't know about you, but I could stand up here all day and give you a bunch of theories about why I think things work the way they do, but until I can give you an example of how you can actually get the results you want to get, the whole speech is kind of pointless, isn't it? So experiment number 1. Now this is really complicated, so make sure you take a bunch of notes. Just shut up. When somebody else talks, just shut up and let them finish what they're saying. And I don't just mean with your mouth. I mean that when you start running a bunch of internal conversations and starting to analyze what they're saying, tell that voice to shut up too. Because then you can actually hear what they're saying. Just let their words hit you and let them impact you. And then allow the pauses to happen in the conversation where you can both, where the other person can hear what they said also. You do that and nothing else, I can guarantee you your conversations will start to change. Number 2, ask questions, especially when you think you already know the answer. Because I guarantee you, you don't know all the answers, much as we like to think we do. I mean, I know all the answers all the time, and I'm always right all the time. But, you know. Number 3, listen to the words that come out of your own mouth. Guarantee you, you'll surprise yourself. I know I do all the time. But also, you can get some insights when you allow those pauses to happen to reflect on the words that you just said and process what you just said. You do that, and you'll have some conversation. So, I gave you 3 experiments. Just take these home and try them out. Try them out later today. You do those 3 things, and I guarantee you, your conversations and your relationships will transform right before your eyes without you having to actually do anything. Madam Toastmaster.